1945, the year the world changed forever. As Soviet artillery shells rained down on Berlin, American Marines fought through hell on Pacific Islands, and British bombers turned German cities to ash. One man cowered 28 feet beneath the earth in a concrete tomb of his own making. This is the story of Adolf Hitler's final refuge, the Führerbunker, a hidden fortress beneath Berlin where the most destructive war in human history would finally end. But this isn't just about one underground bunker. This is about how a global conflict spanning 3 continents, involving Japan, Britain, America, and the Soviet Union, all converged on one claustrophobic chamber where the Third Reich would take its last breath. Hitler didn't have just one bunker. He had an entire underground city beneath Berlin's government district. The main complex consisted of 2 levels. The upper bunker, called the Führerbunker, was built first in 1936. It sat about 20 feet underground and served as the initial air raid shelter for the Reich Chancellery. But as Allied bombing intensified, this wasn't enough. In 1944, construction began on a deeper, more secure facility directly beneath it, the Führerbunker proper. The Führerbunker sat 28 feet underground, protected by a concrete roof nearly 13 feet thick. Think about that for a moment. 13 feet of reinforced concrete. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a fortress designed to survive direct hits from the heaviest bombs the Allies could drop. The bunker contained about 30 rooms spread across a narrow complex. Hitler's personal suite included a bedroom, a study, and a small conference room where he held his final military briefings. Eva Braun, his longtime companion, had her own room nearby. There were also quarters for key staff members, a telephone switchboard room that kept Hitler connected to his crumbling empire, a surgery room, and even a small kennel area. But here's what made this place truly nightmarish. Ventilation was poor. The air was recycled and stale. Diesel generators created constant noise and vibration, and the walls literally wept with condensation. Officers who visited described the smell as unbearable, a mixture of unwashed bodies, mildew, and diesel fumes. This was where Hitler would command a war involving 3 continents and over 100 million military personnel. While Hitler sat in his bunker, American forces were engaged in some of the bloodiest fighting of the entire war. In February 1945, U.S. Marines landed on Iwo Jima, a tiny volcanic island that became a symbol of Japanese resistance. The battle lasted 36 days and cost nearly 7,000 American lives, with almost all 21,000 Japanese defenders fighting to the death. Meanwhile, just as Hitler was moving permanently into the bunker in January, American forces were also liberating the Philippines, fulfilling General MacArthur's famous promise to return. The connection between these Pacific battles and Hitler's bunker might not seem obvious, but it's crucial. Japan's refusal to surrender meant that America couldn't fully focus its resources on Europe. However, by early 1945, the outcome was no longer in doubt on either front. The Allies were coming, from both east and west. From the east, the Soviet Red Army was advancing like an unstoppable tsunami. Joseph Stalin had mobilized the largest military force ever assembled. By January 1945, Soviet forces had pushed across Poland and were preparing for the final assault on Germany itself. The Soviets had suffered unimaginable losses in the war, with estimates suggesting over 27 million Soviet citizens died. They weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming for revenge. From the west, British and American forces had crossed the Rhine River in March 1945, penetrating into the heart of Germany. The Anglo-American bombing campaign, which the British called area bombing and Americans termed precision bombing, had devastated German cities. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, Frankfurt had all been reduced to rubble. The RAF flew nighttime raids while the U.S. 8th Air Force bombed by day. There was no respite for German civilians. Now imagine being Hitler, receiving reports about all of this from your underground concrete cell. The contrast between his delusions and reality became more stark with each passing day. Daily life in the bunker followed a surreal routine. Hitler, who had always been a night owl, completely reversed his schedule underground. He would wake around noon, have his first military briefing in the afternoon, eat dinner very late, and wouldn't go to sleep until dawn. His staff had to adjust to this nocturnal existence, creating a twilight world where day and night lost all meaning. The military briefings became exercises in fantasy. Hitler would move non-existent divisions on maps, ordering counterattacks that could never happen. When generals tried to tell him the truth about Germany's situation, he would rage at them, accusing them of defeatism or treason. Meanwhile, above ground, Soviet artillery was getting closer every day. Here's a chilling detail. While Hitler planned impossible victories, his secretaries could hear the constant rumble of Soviet artillery through the thick concrete. At first, it was distant thunder. By mid-April, the walls shook with each impact. The sound of Berlin dying penetrated even into Hitler's underground fortress. The bunker population swelled as the end approached. Officers, secretaries, guards, Hitler's personal physician, even the Goebbels family with their 6 children, all crowded into the complex. Food was still available, surprisingly. The Reich Chancellery had stockpiles of supplies, and Hitler maintained his vegetarian diet even as Berlin starved. But water was increasingly contaminated, electricity flickered, and the ventilation system struggled to handle the overcrowding. Outside, Berlin was experiencing hell on earth. The Battle of Berlin, which began on April 16, 1945, was one of the war's bloodiest urban battles. Soviet forces attacked from multiple directions, with over 2.5 million troops. The Germans had perhaps 45,000 soldiers left to defend the capital, supplemented by Hitler youth children and elderly men from the Volkssturm militia. It was a slaughter. What made Hitler's situation truly hopeless was the unprecedented alliance arrayed against him. Never before had such different nations united with such determination to destroy a common enemy. The British had been fighting Germany the longest, since September 1939. Winston Churchill had refused to negotiate peace even when Britain stood alone in 1940. By 1945, Britain was exhausted, its economy depleted, its cities bombed, but Churchill's determination never wavered. British forces were now driving through northern Germany, racing toward the Baltic Sea. The Americans had brought industrial might unlike anything the world had ever seen. After Pearl Harbor brought the U.S. into the war in December 1941, American factories began producing weapons at an astonishing rate. By 1945, the United States was building a new warship every single day. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, manufactured in vast numbers, darkened German skies. The Soviets had sacrificed more than anyone. Stalin's forces had destroyed more German divisions than all other allies combined. At Stalingrad in 1943, the Soviets had shattered the myth of German invincibility. At Kursk, they had stopped Hitler's last major offensive. Now, in 1945, Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov was directing the final assault on Berlin with ruthless efficiency. This alliance was already showing cracks. Stalin distrusted the British and Americans, suspecting them of delaying opening a second front to let Germany and the Soviet Union bleed each other dry. Churchill worried about Soviet intentions in Eastern Europe, but all three leaders agreed on one absolute priority. Germany must be completely defeated, and Hitler must be destroyed. The tripartite pact nations, Germany's allies, were also collapsing. Italy had already surrendered in 1943, with Mussolini executed by Italian partisans on April 28, 1945, just days before Hitler's own death. Japan fought on in the Pacific, but was now completely isolated, its navy destroyed, its cities burning under American firebombing raids. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th birthday. Soviet artillery was now close enough that shells hit the Reich Chancellery grounds above the bunker. Hitler briefly emerged to the surface for the last time to inspect Hitler Youth defenders. Photographs from this day show a broken man, trembling, aged beyond his years. His inner circle urged him to flee to Bavaria or Austria, where Wehrmacht units might still protect him. He refused. He would stay in Berlin. April 22nd. Hitler suffered a complete breakdown during the daily briefing. When informed that an SS division he'd ordered to counterattack had failed to move, he exploded in rage, screaming that everyone had betrayed him, that the war was lost. This was the first time Hitler openly admitted defeat. His secretaries heard him sobbing in his room afterward. April 28th. Hitler learned of Mussolini's death. The Italian dictator and his mistress had been captured by partisans, executed, and their bodies hung upside down in a Milan square for crowds to abuse. Hitler became obsessed with avoiding this fate. He ordered extra gasoline brought to the bunker to ensure his body could be burned completely. Also on April 28th, Hitler discovered that Heinrich Himmler, his loyal SS chief, had tried to negotiate surrender with the Western Allies. Hitler's rage was volcanic. He ordered Himmler arrested, though by this point such orders were meaningless. The Nazi leadership was dissolving into chaos. April 29th. Hitler married Eva Braun in a small ceremony in the bunker. Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann served as witnesses. After the ceremony, Hitler dictated his last will and testament, still blaming Jews for the war and urging Germans to continue racial struggle. Even facing death, he learned nothing. That same night, Hitler heard that Soviet forces were just blocks away. They would reach the Reich Chancellery within hours. Time had run out. April 30th, 1945, around 3:30 p.m. Hitler and Eva Braun went into their private suite. Hitler shot himself with his pistol while simultaneously biting a cyanide capsule. Eva took only poison. Their bodies were carried up to the Reich Chancellery garden by staff, placed in a shell crater, doused with gasoline, and set on fire as Soviet shells exploded nearby. Joseph Goebbels became the new Führer for exactly 1 day. On May 1st, he and his wife poisoned their 6 children, then killed themselves. The remaining bunker occupants tried to escape through Berlin's subway tunnels. Most were captured or killed. The war in Europe ended officially on May 8, 1945. Soviet investigators found Hitler's partially burned remains, which were repeatedly buried and exhumed by Soviet forces over the following years. Stalin never publicly confirmed Hitler's death, preferring to keep the West guessing. But the global war wasn't over. In the Pacific, Japan fought on for 3 more months. The battles of Okinawa cost over 12,000 American lives and as many as 100,000 Japanese military deaths, plus over 100,000 Okinawan civilian casualties. President Truman, who had taken office after Roosevelt's death on April 12, 1945, faced a terrible decision. Estimates suggested that invading mainland Japan could cost 1 million Allied casualties. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb destroyed Nagasaki. Simultaneously, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was finally over. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you liked the video.